Hello, and welcome to Elephant Power Productions. I'm American Elephant, call me Kevin, and this is Kev Talks, a series where I talk about what I want to talk about. Well, the year is almost over, and since I've done 2 Marvel videos, let's add a second to the opposing side, shall we? Now, I've made it no secret that I love DC, and especially over this year, I have tried to watch more DC media and explore more characters I knew less about before 2023, but have since become new favorites of mine. Here's the thing, though. Most of the ones I grew attached to this year had decent cult followings or comic fan bases already. But for this video, I want to talk about a character from DC that, no hyperbole whatsoever, I'm sure most of you watching will have never heard of if you don't know about the books we'll be going over. And which character is that? Well, this is Candace, a character introduced in a book reimagining the Super Sons duo made up of John Kent and Damian Wayne, called Ian in this story, titled Super Sons Book 1, The Polar Shield Project, followed by Book 2, The Foxglove Mission, and then Book 3, Escape to Landis. But really,
who the heck is Candace?
No, but good guess. Join me, dear viewer, on a journey as I do everything in my power to make this obscure DC character that next to nobody else on the planet has remotely ever heard of even slightly interesting. This is the DC character you've never heard of. This is Candace of Landis. Oh, and no, this video is not for kids just because I'm talking about kids' books. You've been warned.
This is the story of a girl.
Book 1. A little girl sits next to her hospitalized mother, tears streaming down her face. Her mother tells her things are no longer safe. She hands her daughter a box, tells her not to open it until her 14th birthday, and that she must sail from their home of Upper Landis to Columbria before giving praise to Ra Harakti. The girl is still understandably sad and scared, but her mother calmly takes her hand with a smile and tells her to be brave. That this flower tattoo she passes onto her arm should remind her of 2 things. 1, beauty is no guard against treachery. And 2, power is nothing without compassion. She then says this tattoo will be with her till death, like all Candaces before her, and that one day she will be ready to lead the 5. Although the girl is still confused, her mother can basically only say, "It will all make sense in time." This is not the first thing we see from Candace's story, however. We actually begin our story, and the first book, with the girl meeting a fortune teller she had a vision of on her 14th birthday. The woman already knows her name, and that it is her birthday, so she asks what she wishes for. Candace says she wants to see her future. When asked to show her hand, the fortune teller recognizes the flowers in her tattoo as poisonous foxgloves, and then calls Candace Her Highness before promptly locking the door. Stranger danger. The woman says the 4 fingers, of which Candace would be the 5th, seek audience with her, and those 4, all of them also being young African women, quickly show themselves, saying they want loyalty and for her to come with them. Candace, despite what her mother told her about leading a 5, is likely not thinking about that due to rightfully being creeped out, so she pulls an element of surprise and escapes by knocking over a candle on the table that lights the place up. Also, that flashback with her mother from earlier happens after we see she has opened the box, revealing what look like family pictures and some assorted items. This is where the rest of the book's plot begins. The only stuff you need to know about it, though, before we see her again, is that Lois Lane, John Kent, and Ian Wayne have all moved out of Metropolis to Candace's current city of Windermere. Oh, and there's this one panel where Batman shoots a laser beam.
That's ridiculous. I value human life much more than you ever will.
The next we see of Candace, John recognizes her, since he had already seen her at the library a few days ago. The fact that I thought an entire scene was missing because I didn't notice these text boxes on first reading should prove I am going insane. He finally introduces himself to her, and also kind of to his new friend Tilly, with both of them and Ian now working on a case involving people being poisoned, Lois Lane included. Candace and John end up checking out an abandoned place called the Devil's Eatery, which, 1, I can only assume was opened by one of these guys, and 2, has the same logo as what I think is a fan from her mother's box. After investigating more with the boys and Tilly, she has another vision. But we don't see what it is until she investigates the eatery alone and asks herself questions. It's revealed she saw a location called the Columbrian Quarter, but the more important part is the next page, where in it we see Candace kneeling in a black circle before an older woman holding a crown, multiple people watching nearby with John and Ian among them, and 2 African bush elephants? Also, apparently, Candace asked Ian for help when she moved here and told him that she is African royalty. Keep the use of African royalty in mind. It will be confusing later. After a misunderstanding, she convinces the team to keep fighting as a unit, and they defeat the foreshadowed villain of this book, Averick, at a train station, where she and some goons try enacting a scheme. Plus, Candace actually gets a bit of control over her vision powers during this fight, helping the team with their enemies, almost catching them off guard, and assisting Tilly. The book then ends with Ian saying that they're just getting started. Book 2. The next issue begins with Candace getting onto a boat at the Windermere shipyard, while getting assistance from Ian and John when the Fingers try to stop her from going home. The only thing you need to know is that during it, one of the Fingers seems to command rats. Huh. Oh, and once again,
Element of surprise!
On her way back, Candace has a flashback to when a flood destroyed her home due to the actions of one General Alfeasnick, I think is how you say it. However, a flock of birds in the shape of an arrow grabs her attention, and when she jumps into the water to follow it, she's carried by swans, of all things, to the shore. While Candace is on the Columbrian shore, we see the flashback she had earlier end with her mother calling a meeting to stop Alfeasnick for good, amongst other royalty. As the boys back in Windermere deal with the Fingers, Candace talks with a woman she met on the shore and realizes that birds have always been there for her since she was a kid. She thought it was normal, but now she understands that there is a special connection going on here. And in case it wasn't obvious, every Finger has the power to communicate with a specific animal group. Unfortunately, said Fingers, having gathered information from the boys, leave Windermere, and Candace learns from a young guide the woman from earlier told her to find that there is apparently a bounty on her head. I am not sure who issued this bounty, but we're moving on. The Fingers make their way to a flooded city hinted at earlier in the book called Sinapolis, where they show off more of their animal powers and make a deal with some criminals to find their 5th member. From here, Candace starts getting a better handle on her bird powers, even defeating her antagonistic pursuers for the first time in a fight. And she makes her way to the Columbrian Quarter, where she finds some anointing oil at a garden's desert environment before the Fingers attack her again. This time though, as she's cornered, her skin looks like it's about to boil, and some pretty cool drawings and use of shading on her skin, and holy shit! Okay then, to recap. Candace's powers are now precognition, cross-species communication with birds, and the might of insert African Zeus equivalent here, I guess.
You don't have the ball.
More fighting ensues, and the book ends with the villains getting 2 victories, getting the virus they need for their plans and busting out Averick. But it ends on some hope, with the gang back together and knowing where they need to go next. Book 3. The first Candace scene in the final book of note is her finally returning to Landis, before getting another flashback to her mother being thrown in jail by what I assume are foot soldiers of the general from earlier following his takeover, but it might actually be something else. And it's dumb if it is, we'll get back to it. To speed things up a bit, some cops force her to flee. She's helped by a mysterious figure who I don't think we see after this point, but she knows her language and helps her escape some of the Fingers' rats. Candace outruns more cops by animating birds to life from stone. She follows a map on the anointing oil's container. Wait, what the fuck? She brought birds to life from stone? Well shit, I didn't know this was Scooby-Doo and the Monster of Mexico. Hit me with that Carolina! Candace arrives at a tent with some other rulers of Landis gathered together and accepts her place as Empress. She rallies everyone, telling them to prepare for battle, and is assisted by 2 new faces. A blind young warrior named Kazuka, and the aptly named Archer, who both look pretty cool, actually. Hey, why wasn't this series about these three becoming heroes of Landis or something? The girls travel for a desert region with the boys not too far behind them. But they are warned that there is a dangerous group in this desert, led by Talia al Ghul, who, if you were paying attention earlier, is Damien's mother, though Ian doesn't know it in this story. Candace, the boys, and the girls converge on a research facility where bombs are being made for the overarching virus threat, which is currently in the hands of the Fingers. A big fight breaks out at a village building between the Fingers and the heroes, but fortunately, although Talia threatens to unleash the virus, it's actually vulnerable to sunlight at this stage, so when it shatters in the light, it immediately disintegrates. Candace and Ian are the ones to beat Talia, ending the fight. They all regroup, and with her new position as Empress, Candace gets an army to battle Talia's forces while her birds take out enemy ships, before finally helping to finish off the villain's LexCorp facility with a powerful lightning bolt. And no, Lex does not appear in these books, unfortunately. Candace, as the book ends, becomes Empress. The Fingers just start acting nice now because apparently their kingdoms were under threat and they were forced into this fight this whole time, so that's something. The coronation happens and the journey ends on a group hug. Okay, so that was quite a bit to go over in a short amount of time, but why don't we simplify it first by answering one question. Do I think the book series is good? Kinda. To mention some quick positives up front, the artwork by Gonzales, I'm sorry if I butchered that first name, is great. The designs are pretty strong and all the main characters are very distinct in appearance. The backgrounds are simple, but not lazy. The fights are drawn nicely with a few cool perspective shots in there, and the visuals for them have great colors in several spots. The main quartet of characters are pretty likable, as I'll discuss later, and by the end I did feel like they were friends, even if I felt like the book missed some steps to get there along the way. Unfortunately, I do still have problems with these books. While some of the one scene per page pacing was appreciated in a few areas, there were other times where I felt things moved way too damn fast. As stated before, I thought for weeks, I shit you not, weeks, that an entire scene was missing from my digital purchase of the first book because I did not see the time cards indicating that this shot was the first time that John sees Candace. And plus, there were some bits where the dialogue just made me laugh with how goofy it was in its presentation. But these are just small potatoes. Let's actually get to the meaty stuff. Now, I know this video is about Candace, but if you'll indulge me, I'd like to make some detours before we move on to really discussing her. And our first detour shall focus on the series' underwhelming antagonists. Yay. Getting this out now, the villains are mostly very boring and have little to no personality. This doctor guy who feels like he should have been Lex Luthor is boring. This general guy who feels like he's taking the place of a certain other is boring. Averick is boring. Talia, as a final villain for a Damien story where he rejects her for the superhero life Batman gave him, is a good idea on paper, but the series introduces her too late, and she doesn't really get much to do here. So the end result, especially when it comes to this scene, feels a bit hollow. Oh, and remember that General Alfeasnik guy? You know, the one who flooded Candace's home, or at least one of them, seemingly had her mother put in a cell, and was set up as a big, cruel final bad guy with great influence on her home? Yeah, we never see him. I wish I was kidding. We never see this guy physically outside of the one flashback silhouette. And not only is his evil general position basically filled by this boring dude in the story, but apparently there were two separate guys the whole time. What? Because Book 3's ending mentions some dictator named Masdam Havarti, who's just jailed out of sight and never shown. Like, why? Why this setup if it's not gonna amount to anything, and you're just gonna throw in another guy we have no connection to? Anyway, let's finally discuss these young ladies, shall we? The Four Fingers, named Aminia, Bashada, Khalifa, and Natasa, by the way, are the only villains in the series I genuinely wanted to see expanded upon, but sadly they barely were by the end. The big problem I have is that it felt like the books made them do evil things just to force them into the villain role. Like, they tried to have their cake and eat it too, but they didn't have enough time to make 2 cakes. They were willing to work with criminals and threaten innocent people just to get Candace to join them after she refuses their quote-unquote peaceful offerings, which I would understand from a villainous perspective in a certain context. But this becomes a problem when the book drops this twist last minute. So apparently, they were being forced to do this by the unseen dictator guy. So we were meant to look at them as much more sympathetic antagonists, even though when they held a woman and her baby hostage to get their way, they were smiling over it and acting evil. So now their previous actions feel unnecessarily crueler and stupider. And outside of Bashada, who I'll get back to in a minute, they never have any fingers not be okay with this or call each other out for going too far with their methods. Which feeds into a larger problem overall with the Fingers as villains and a big missed opportunity in my opinion. Their lack of individual character expansion. Let me explain. So, the 4 are royalty from different corners of Landis, which of course is inspired by Africa, and this is shown visually in their designs. While I can't pinpoint the exact African cultures 3 of these looks are based on, I have seen Natasa's kind of clothing before, and I do know that Khalifa is inspired by the Maasai and Samburu people of Kenya and Tanzania due to her red robe, shaved head, and elaborate necklace. Now, there's this scene where the Fingers arrive on the shore Candace did that I want to mention because it shows what they could have been as characters. Bashada wants to help the people in trouble on this shore, but Aminia, who is, I guess, their leader, shoots her idea down, calling them hopeless.
This bitch!
With that in mind, I think the books would have benefited from exploring them more like this. From showing them more as their own people and discussing a bit more about where they came from, how they were raised, what values each of them have individually, and how those can bounce off each other if they unite. Maybe the customs and traditions of the real-world cultures inspiring their wardrobes could be used as cultural inspiration for the beliefs of Landis's different corners, in a deeper way than just, it's visually like Africa, but isn't, kind of. We'll get back to it. Ignoring the obvious comparison of Wakanda's tribes in Black Panther, think Avatar: The Last Airbender's 4 Nations, Legends of Chima's Animal Tribes, if you're a LEGO fan and based, or for you Toku nerds out there, Osama Sentai King Oger's recent exploration of Terra, and how the kingdom's customs shape each ranger's characterization. And you don't even need like a whole television season to do it. If Osama Sentai King Oger can do it in just the first 5 episodes, I think 3 books could have done it with a few extra pages. Also, Bashada, to focus on another area they could have expanded on for the Fingers, warns Candace of danger when she finds the time to do so, because she doesn't love the group's cruelty and wants to think separately from the unit. This is what I wanted more of out of these girls. More moments and characterization of them that gave me an idea about who they were, what they wanted out of becoming rulers beyond destiny, how they might rule if they win in the end, how they view Candace, etc. The only prominent characterization we arguably get on that front outside of Bashada comes from Aminia and Khalifa, who are always the most direct and commanding of the group when negotiating with other foes. My point is, I saw potential in the Fingers to evolve into characters with unique ways of looking at the world, and to have personalities better informed by where they come from. The possibility was there, and I was willing to let them cook, but they ended up half-baked, sadly. Though to be fair, I'm starting to wonder if they ever could have had enough time for exploring the Fingers or Landis, or even Candace in this story, because, well, they're not the main focus of these Super Sons books.
It's so white, it's blinding me!
And on that note, let's crack a section open for the boys, shall we?
Bruce, it's been 5 years. You still owe me $16. Fuck off.
Positives up front, I think the Sons themselves are likable characters. 2 big things I appreciate about their story are, 1, John's disliking of Ian spawning from not knowing how the Waynes are tied to a situation that directly affects the Kent's home of Metropolis, and 2, both swinging on different ends of a self-motivation spectrum. John's motivation to fight the villains is more selfless, as he's trying to find a cure for his mom. He's likable, usually doing his best to try and make good impressions with people he meets, and is often the kindest or happiest of the quartet. I related to the moments where he felt, despite everything he could do, so much is still out of his hands, especially when shifts in his world forced him to move away from home. His romance, at least I think it's a romance, with Tilly, who, by the way, takes on her own identity of Puppet Girl, is mostly in the background, but is still cute, with her having a good personality as well. And I liked how Clark's reminder of what Superman stands for motivates him after he acts somewhat bratty in the beginning of book 1. Ian's motivations, on the other hand, while still noble, are also slightly more selfish. He wants to help people, sure, but it feels like his deeper motivation at first is to be more like his dad and wanting to work with him. And I think it adds to what makes this version of the character interesting. Ian Wayne is not the bratty ninja Damian Wayne most people probably think of thanks to his animated versions. This is a take on Damian Wayne that has been shaped by Bruce Wayne's care as a father and wants to go under Batman's wing. He's more relaxed and mature, calmer and collected. Though not above getting angry, he's a more emotionally intelligent take on what most people expect from Damian that feels like he's growing out of his old ways, or possibly even grown out of them fully, and can finally have some fun instead of feeling like a League of Shadows puppet. His confidence combines well with John's moments of optimism, and their bickering helps establish a kind of brother dynamic for them. So yeah, the Super Sons themselves, pretty decent. Oh, and I guess I should mention side characters. Superman and Batman are mostly just there to pop in or be brought up for plot reasons. Lois Lane is taken out of commission. Perry White is here. I almost completely forgot to mention this Patience girl, even though she's basically the Alfred in this story and helps Ian out, so yeah, this is Patience. She's— Wait! Yet another thing I forgot during editing, there's also this old lady that takes care of John named Mrs. Kayak, and oh, they also have this little pug they bring with them named Taco, and— wait, Jimmy's in this and a girl?
There's enough male hormones here to transition someone.
I've gone through these books multiple times each now. How do I keep forgetting there are so many characters? And Kazuka and Archer are underutilized, despite both looking really damn cool. Oh, and I don't remember what this hooded character's name is because, to be frank, I don't know if the book did either. Overall, villains aside, the characters are not really a problem. It's just that the Super Sons are the main characters here, so, you know, Candace arguably doesn't get all the focus it feels like her story should. Oh, and while we're discussing plot points that take up space, let's talk about world building. Don't worry, I'll try to make this section quick. So, most DC Comics media usually just takes the planet Earth that we know in real life and adds fake places or swaps real ones for fake ones. Usually just fictional cities and towns like Gotham, Metropolis, Coast City, Central City, Palmyra, Amnesty Bay, Keystone, etc. Or fictional countries like Atlantis, Bialia, Kahndaq, Markovia, Themyscira, Corto Maltese, Zambezi. You get the point. But the world of these Super Sons is different. This world has been heavily messed up by global warming. It's what the first book's title is tied to, as the Polar Shield project itself involves satellites covering the world in dust from Mars, their words not mine, that cools the planet's temperature down to stabilize it. It's why Superman's out of the story, mostly because he's up in space helping to get it. Here's where things begin to get slightly confusing though the more you think about it. So, Windermere, simple enough. It's a city near a river coast. Nothing complex. However, it is not in North America, technically. I don't think. At least, not anymore? Okay, so it is in Columbria, which is described by the guides at the end of each book as the quote-unquote world's freest democracy that is messed up heavily by flooding and includes Gotham, Metropolis, Windermere, and the Columbrian Quarter. Now, full disclosure, I got confused and thought the Columbrian Quarter was in Landis since Candace used to live there, even though she clearly states on this page that it was her home after fleeing Landis, so that was my mistake. I did not pay enough attention there. But I think this flashback still has the potential to confuse readers as to whether this is the same Columbrian spot or in Landis, because Candace is said to have lived in Columbria after fleeing there, but this flashback clearly takes place in Landis, since this is when she was a little girl and her mother has a commanding presence in this area. So you'd think this Columbrian spot is just meant to be a parallel to her home in the past and helping her relate more to the plight of the people in the tents in this area. But then they have this flashback shot at the beginning with the same sailors and birds in the sky syncing up with this present day shot, so it feels like they're saying it's the same place. But then why would her mother have control over an area outside of her continent? Isn't that kind of like if the president of Mexico had final say on some shit in New Mexico? Oh, and this area isn't even the Columbrian quarter, so you can't even say it's like a cross-cultural thing. So seriously, what was up with that? Anyway, back to continents. I'm pretty sure Columbria is just North America, but underwater in several spots and renamed due to the state of the world for some reason. And like I've said, I'm confident Landis was Africa because Ian definitely calls Candace African royalty. Though, since Landis has at least been around for Candace's lifetime, meaning it's been around long enough to be its own continent, why call her lineage African if it isn't anymore? Maybe it's just because Ian's a kid and he wanted to simplify it to John since he's not as smart as him, and let's be real, Ian, even as a more emotionally mature person, would totally think he's smarter than everybody. I don't know. So to summarize, Landis used to be Africa, like Columbria was probably North America, but they changed their names after they went underwater because reasons. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, the people forced to flee due to the flooding are treated with such negativity by locals in other towns that they have the nickname Flood Runners, which is used in a very insulting way. So that's yet another thing we focus on in these books. Look, I appreciate that this series tried to tackle a subject like this, but the global warming part kind of feels like an afterthought once Polar Shield is activated, since it stabilizes the Earth's temperature in a short panel span, and the threat for the rest of the books is the virus. And B, I wonder if cutting it in spots would have made for slightly less confusing world building, because adding this new continent stuff makes things feel off in execution, and clearly something's got lost in translation for me when reading. Maybe it's just because I'm working on end of term school stuff right now, so my brain is overly occupied with old animation knowledge, but I found that part of these books more confusing than it probably is. Alright though, enough of all that. Let's partially ignore our heroes and fingers, forget the other lame villains, forget the world building, forget all this stuff, and let's go back to the main point of this video for our final two sections. It's time to answer two questions that are the entire reason I made this video. Question 1. Do I think Candace deserves to come back with new takes on her character in other DC continuities like so many others? And question 2. Do I think, on her own, she is a good character in these books? My answer to the first is yes. My answer to the second is just enough, but with catches holding her back. Here's what I mean. Candace is a decent character. She's likable enough, she is good at thinking quickly on her feet, she is kind to those she meets unless they are not kind back. She's just a decent person who clearly puts an effort to be compassionate before powerful because of her mother's last words. She starts the series as a more confused kid just wanting to know what the future holds for her, and by the end of this journey, she embraces her position of royalty with a better handle on her powers, friends, and what she wants to do next in life. It's not an impressive character arc, but it's a clear evolution in how she acts, what she can do, and what she intends to do moving forward. Candace is not a bad character, and she is a nice kid. But she's not deep. At first, I was going to rag on some aspects of her powers, but the books in hindsight do a good job of kind of escalating her capabilities the more answers she finds. Though animating pictures to life was wild, and she didn't really need training with her powers, which I get may annoy some readers. Here's my real issue with her character instead. While again, I do think Candace and the other kids felt like genuine friends by the end, I don't think the books spend enough time with them interacting outside of their mission. Yes, I understand that these kids are fighting a ticking clock and they have to save lives from the overarching threat. But I wish we got to see more of them just being kids. Again, there are brief instances of this, like John and Ian bickering with each other, or this part in book 3 where they and Tilly get burgers and eat them inside the Batwing, which is fun. But for Candace specifically, she gets very few scenes where it feels like she and the team can relax and talk about something that isn't endangering them. And sometimes when she does, it's not even with the boys. Like, I know this isn't entirely fair as a comparison, but let's take Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 as an example. Yes, the characters had to act fast in that film multiple times, but for all the scenes where they're fighting ticking clocks, there were scenes of them just vibing on nowhere, listening to music, having talks with each other as a family, slowing down to make people feel better about themselves. Conversations that were casual and not in service of plot, but in service of character. Because these movies knew how to pace themselves for slower and faster moments. For the dramatic and the funny. That's not to say these Super Sons books don't have any slower scenes or decent jokes, but a lot of the former are, again, plot-focused, not character-focused. And sadly, Candace is arguably hit the hardest by this. I wish we got to see her bond more with the others and not just working with them. Maybe she and Ian could have bonded coming from powerful families and being far from different homes. Maybe he wants to look out for her after learning of her supposed destiny and how much she loves her mother, since he has bad blood with his mom and, being groomed to be a ninja assassin is not a good way to be raised. Maybe she and Tilly could have bonded over things they both research at the library. Maybe she and John could have talked about compassion being part of their family's values and how to balance. There's a school bus outside my house right now. Maybe she and John could have talked about compassion being part of their family's values and how to balance it with their power. Or hell, if you wanted to take it a step further, you could have maybe had her and John like each other. I know I said earlier that John and Tilly are seemingly together in these books, and they are cute as a duo, but John still clearly cares quite a bit about Candace. I mean, look at these panels staging. Look at how excited he is. Look at the adorable. And taking this a step further, when he first sees her in this panel, he's clearly blushing behind that window. Like, it's not the craziest ship imaginable.
I've seen worse.
Where?
You don't want to know.
Now, of course, I am aware this could also more than likely just be John being nervous about trying to make a friend. After his last two run-ins with other kids, Tilly being one of them, did not go great. And no, I am not saying they needed romance to make Candace a better character. I am just suggesting a story idea that they could have done but chose not to, which is fine. Again, at her core, Candace is a decent person, and there is nothing wrong with that. You don't need deep layers of complexity or romance to be a good character or have a good story. Still, if these books had more time and in some areas better pacing to explore her and the boys a bit more as just kids, I would have appreciated that all the same, 100%. Oh yeah, and this last thing I'm going to talk about is absolutely a nitpick. Yeah, I know, just because a character wears a shirt with an animal they like on it, that doesn't mean they automatically have to have that as a motif, but I still find it odd that the first book went out of its way to show elephants in her coronation vision after having one on her first cover of the book, nay, cover of the series, shirt, thus implying cultural, or at least a personal, maybe familial significance, only for there to be zero depiction of elephants anywhere else in these books. Believe me, I checked. There is almost less elephant representation here than there is in fucking Friendship is Magic. And I also did not expect her powers to be less Dumbo and more...
Bird up.
There we go, nitpicking over. I just want more elephant superheroes. Have you ever heard of Marvel's Elephant Steve? He punched Ultron. So, how would I bring Candace back into a new DC storyline? Well, firstly, if the goal was to make her part of the wider DC continuity, I would make Landis just a fictional African country, Zambezi style. You know, just to simplify things. No confusing continent stuff. The four fingers in my hands, not the ones connected to them, would be written as stronger characters who bring up their kingdoms more and their ideas of how to rule over Landis despite their differences. Alfeasnick would absolutely be among the main villains, as the kind we love to hate and want to see get the shit kicked out of in the end, and also have an actual design.
This black thing over there, what is that?
Obama.
Going back to Candace herself, you can absolutely tell a powerful story about what's already here. A story about a girl trying to find her place in the world without her mother, or being tied down to others' less compassionate ideals. I certainly find that second part relatable. Or maybe you could discuss unrealistic expectations and the pressures of them being pushed onto kids, let alone kids' superheroes. Even just those two ideas have a lot of potential, and I have seen them explored really well in and out of DC media. When it comes to the boys and Tilly, they could still be a part of Candace's story if you want them to, but maybe have them as side characters this time so she gets more focus. And if you want to connect her to other DC characters, her bird powers could come from the Red, the DC force tied to all animal life throughout the multiverse, connecting heroes like Animal Man and Beast Boy. It'd be a fun connection that doesn't feel like it needs to drag in other heroes just to boost her up. Though, speaking of other heroes and connections, an African female DC character with yellow and orange as part of at least one attire they own, who has connections to animals, comes from a fictional African location harmed by warlords, lived in America for a while, and works with Batman and Superman type heroes? I wonder who that possibly reminds me of. In all seriousness though, tying Candace's story to Mari McCabe, aka Vixen, could be cool since they have those elements in common. Just so long as, again, Vixen's presence doesn't overshadow Candace, which, to be honest, would be no easy feat depending on the writer, because Vixen is fucking awesome, among other things.
We must stay focused, brothers.
Of course, it's very unlikely this kid will ever come back or be reimagined anytime soon with more stories. Still, I don't think she should be forgotten, nor should this series. There is plenty to like about her in these books, and while I don't think either are perfect, they're decent for kids, they clearly have good qualities in them, and conceptually there are interesting ideas in their text and imagery. Just enough as to where, if someone's interested, maybe they could reimagine it into a new take. And hey, if no one else will try to rework Candace, allow me to take the first step. Introducing Empress Candace of Landis, codename Elephant Bird. This take on Candace gets to keep her bird communication powers, but since she loves elephants, she mixes that into her costuming. Instead of being away from Landis, she has grown up there her whole life, but gets thrown into new power upon her mother's death, that leaves her under a lot of pressure and the leader of a not-so-heroic princess group called the Five Foxgloves, all of which have powers connected to the African Big Five and other animal groups. Still, Candace finds a way to prevail against impossible odds, and slowly learns how to protect Landis from invading forces her own way, so she may cement a better future for herself and her kingdom. And that's gonna do it for today's video. Thanks to anyone who watched this, seriously. I know it was an odd subject and may not be your cup of tea. To be frank, I almost gave up on this project at points because I clearly had trouble focusing on and remembering each book's content a lot. However, I still got this out. And overall, I'm proud of what I've done this year. I've kept up with school, been to and seen a lot of cool places, made some cool fan art, and started a video essay series. One 2019 me would be very, very proud of. And the episodes of which have zero mistakes whatsoever. Oh yeah. Damn it. Well, at least my text was proofread perfectly. Really?
Ah, shit.
Well, at least nothing tied to my friend groups aged poorly? Ah, good. So anyway.
Oh, god damn it!
Yeah, 2023 hasn't been perfect, but that's not gonna stop me from heading into my future. Not now. I'm American Elephant, call me Kevin, thanks for stopping by Elephant Power Productions. Subscribe if you want more content like this. Follow me on DeviantArt if you want to look at my fan art, Wattpad if you want to read a Power Rangers fanfiction, and Twitter if you want to keep up with me regularly. Thank you all for 101 subscribers, even if most of you are just my friends from Twitter, though seriously, thank you guys, you are all awesome. Enjoy the holidays, and I'll see you on the next episode of Kev Talks, which should be interesting, as at the time of this video, I haven't chosen a topic yet. Guess we'll have to wait and see what that is. Either way, take care, Happy New Year, and Amanla and Lovu to all of you.
Element of surprise!
He did the same joke about 3 times already. I don't think it's funny anymore.
Don't care!